The quiet streets, the familiar faces, the illusion of peace. Small towns. They promise sanctuary, a respite from the clamor. But beneath the quaint veneer, secrets fester, and traditions take on a terrifying life of their own. Welcome, neighbor, to Nightmare True Horror. Tonight, we pulled back the curtains on 7 true tales from communities where everyone knows everyone takes on a sinister new meaning. What unsettling whispers have you heard echoing down Main Street after dark? Share your own small-town dread, your stories of close-knit horror, in the comments below. Let the town square of fear gather your chilling accounts, and if you're drawn to the disquiet that lurks behind picket fences, ensure you are subscribed. For Nightmare True Horror always has a new, unsettling story brewing in the local coffee shop. Settle in. These aren't just fireside tales. These are the truths that townsfolk try to bury, and the most chilling revelations often come when the town lights go out, one by one. Let us now take a stroll into the heart of darkness. After 15 years as an investigative journalist in Chicago, burnout hit me like a freight train. The constant deadlines, the grim stories, the threats from people I'd exposed. It had all taken its toll. When my doctor warned me about my blood pressure, I finally listened. 3 weeks later, I found myself driving a U-Haul down the winding road into Mill Haven, population 1892, where I'd purchased a quaint Victorian home site, unseen, save for online photos and a virtual tour. The town looked like a postcard from another era. Main Street featured brick storefronts with striped awnings, an old-fashioned diner, and a single-screen movie theater advertising films that had left larger cities months ago. People actually nodded as they passed each other on the sidewalk. Children rode bicycles without supervision. It was exactly the Norman Rockwell existence I'd been craving after years of crime scenes and corruption. The realtor had left the key under a flower pot, as promised. My new home stood at the edge of town, a blue Victorian with white trim, surrounded by ancient oak trees. The floorboards creaked welcomingly as I stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscope patterns across hardwood floors. For the first time in years, my shoulders relaxed. This was home now. After unloading essentials from the U-Haul, I walked down the gravel driveway to check the mailbox. That's when I found the note, a small white card with neat handwriting. Welcome to Mill Haven. We don't like questions here. No signature, no explanation. I turned the card over, looking for more, finding nothing. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone watching from the road or neighboring houses. Probably just small-town humor, I decided, pocketing the card and returning to unpacking. That evening, I walked to the town's only grocery store. An elderly clerk named Martha rang up my items, her smile warm, but her eyes cautious. "You're the one who bought the old Wilson place," she said. Not a question. "That's right, Daniel Harper." I extended my hand. She stared at it for a moment before giving it a perfunctory shake. "We don't get many new folks." I was looking for somewhere quiet. Change of pace from Chicago. Something flickered behind her eyes. "Chicago? What did you do there?" "I was a journalist. Chicago Tribune." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Martha's smile remained fixed, but the warmth vanished entirely. "Journalist," she repeated. "Interesting work, I'm sure." It was. "I'm retired now. Working on a novel." She nodded, handing me my change with stiff fingers. "Well, Mill Haven is certainly quiet. We like to keep to ourselves, mind our business." As I gathered my groceries, Martha added, "Town meetings on Thursday. Town hall, 7 p.m. Everyone attends." It sounded more like an instruction than an invitation. Walking home under gathering storm clouds, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Twice I turned to find the street empty behind me. Yet when I passed the diner, conversations visibly halted, faces turning to track my progress through the window. By the time I reached my house, the hair on my arm stood on end, despite the humid summer air. That night, heavy rain pounded against my roof and windows. I woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of my front gate creaking. Peering through rain-streaked windows, I saw nothing but shadows dancing under the streetlight. Just the wind, I told myself, though I checked the locks twice before returning to bed. Morning revealed muddy footprints on my porch. They approached my front door before turning around. Over the next few days, I met more townspeople. On the surface, they were welcoming. Mrs. Davis brought a blueberry pie. Harold from the hardware store offered advice about the house's old pipes. Sheriff Mills stopped by to introduce himself, though his eyes inventoried my living room with an unsettling thoroughness. Every conversation eventually circled to the same questions. Why Millhaven? How long was I staying? What exactly was my novel about? When I mentioned the welcome note from my mailbox, their reactions were oddly uniform. A brief pause, then dismissal. Kids playing pranks. Sheriff Mills suggested without conviction. Don't take it seriously, Harold advised, suddenly interested in his watch. Thursday arrived. The town hall was a stately brick building with Greek columns and heavy wooden doors. Inside, it seemed the entire population had indeed turned out, filling rows of wooden chairs. Conversation hushed as I entered. Mayor Wilson, a silver-haired man in his 60s, stood at the podium. His smile didn't reach his cold blue eyes. Our newest resident, he announced. Daniel Harper from Chicago. All faces turned to me with identical expressions, polite interest masking something unreadable. I took a seat near the back, feeling like a specimen under glass. The meeting proceeded with mundane town business, road repairs, the upcoming fall festival, budget allocations. Nothing unusual. Yet there was an undercurrent of tension, like the moment before a thunderclap. Occasionally, cryptic phrases passed between speakers. Everything remains satisfactory. The arrangement continues. No disruptions reported. After the meeting, people filed out quickly. No one lingered to chat. Mayor Wilson approached me, hand extended. Mr. Harper, settling in well? Yes, thank you. Lovely town. Indeed it is. He held my gaze a beat too long. We work hard to keep it that way. Some places thrive on change, questions, investigations. Not Millhaven. We value continuity. The emphasis on the word made my skin crawl. Before I could respond, he continued. I understand you were quite the journalist. Corruption exposés, political scandal, even that serial murder case in 2018. My pulse quickened. I hadn't mentioned those specific stories to anyone. Research for your novel about small towns? He asked, voice deceptively light. Actually, it's a historical fiction piece. Nothing to do with journalism. Good? His hand clamped my shoulder. Very good. That night, I couldn't sleep. My journalistic instincts, dormant for months, had reawakened with a vengeance. I spent hours online researching Millhaven's history. The town's prosperity seemed at odds with the economic decline plaguing similar rural communities. While factories closed across the Midwest, Millhaven's primary employer, a meat processing plant, had thrived for generations. Crime statistics were virtually non-existent. No missing persons reports in decades. Too perfect. I dug deeper, finding older newspaper archives. In 1952, a reporter from a Chicago paper visited Millhaven, investigating rumors about the meat plant. He never filed his story. His car was found abandoned on the highway, the journalist himself never seen again. At 2 a.m., I heard it again, the front gate creaking. This time, I moved silently to the window. 3 figures stood at my fence, their faces obscured by the darkness. They remained motionless, just watching. When I flicked on the porch light, they melted into the shadows between houses. The next morning, a second note waited in my mailbox. Last warning, no questions. I called my old editor in Chicago, explaining my suspicions. Sounds like you found your next story, she said. But be careful, the line went dead. When I tried calling back, I had no signal. My internet connection was down too. At the telephone company office, the technician informed me that service to my address would be unavailable indefinitely due to infrastructure issues. That afternoon, I drove to the library to use their computers. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Evans, watched me nervously. When I searched for information about Millhaven's history, most pages returned access denied messages. I switched tactics, looking up property records instead. Every deed in Millhaven contained an unusual covenant. Resident agrees to abide by the silent agreement of Millhaven, established 1879. What's the silent agreement? I asked Mrs. Evans. She paled, closing my session abruptly. Library's closing early today. It's only 2 p.m. We're closed. Her hand trembled as she ushered me out. That night, I decided to investigate the meat processing plant myself. Located at the town's edge, the massive facility operated 24/7, its lights blazing against the night sky. I parked my car in the woods nearby, and approached on foot. The security seemed excessive for a rural meat plant. Barbed wire fencing, surveillance cameras, armed guards at the entrance. I circled to the rear, finding a drainage ditch that ran beneath the fence. The smell was overwhelming. Not just the expected odor of animal processing, but something else. Something chemical and acrid that burned my nostrils. I squeezed through the ditch, emerging behind a loading dock. Through a partially open door, I could see workers in white protective suits moving between large stainless steel vats. They wore respirators despite being indoors. Whatever they were processing, it wasn't just meat. A flash of movement caught my eye. Someone exiting through a side door marked special processing. It was Sheriff Mills. He carried a sealed metal container to a waiting van with federal government plates. The container was labeled Millhaven Formula 37B. I snapped photos with my phone, then crept closer to the main building. Through a grimy window, I could see into what appeared to be a laboratory. Scientists in hazmat suits worked with equipment more suited to a high-level research facility than a meat plant. On a whiteboard, someone had written, "Yield improved 43% with new subjects." A hand clamped over my mouth. I was dragged backward into darkness. "You just couldn't help yourself, could you?" Mayor Wilson's voice hissed in my ear. "Journalists, always digging." I was bundled into a van, my protest silenced by a cloth pressed over my face. The world went black. When I regained consciousness, I was seated at a conference table. The room was windowless, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. Mayor Wilson sat opposite me, flanked by Sheriff Mills and a woman in a lab coat. My phone and wallet were on the table between us. "Mr. Harper," the mayor began, "Millhaven exists because of a bargain made generations ago. Our founders discovered something in the caves beneath this town. Something with properties. The government takes what we produce, and in return, Millhaven prospers." "What properties?" My voice was hoarse. "It extends life, prevents disease, enhances cognition." The woman in the lab coat spoke clinically. "The applications are countless. National security implications are significant. But it requires human neural tissue to synthesize," I said, the horrible truth dawning on me. "That's why no one goes missing in Millhaven itself. You don't take your own." Sheriff Mills smiled thinly. "Clever. The silent agreement means we protect our own. Outsiders passing through occasionally contribute to the greater good. Transients. People no one misses. And now me?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Not necessarily." Mayor Wilson spread his hands. "You could join us, as a resident, protected by the agreement. Become complicit in murder? Become part of something greater?" The mayor corrected. "Millhaven has supplied every president, joint chief, and intelligence director for 70 years. Our formula is what keeps America's elite functioning. It's how we maintain our edge. And if I refuse," the three exchanged glances, "then you become a contributor, rather than a beneficiary." They left me alone to consider my options. Through the door, I heard their murmured conversation. He could be useful. Background in media. Manage our communications. I examined the room. Concrete walls, steel door, surveillance camera in the corner. No obvious escape. My phone was locked but still on the table. They'd underestimated this old journalist's tricks. While appearing to hold my head in despair, I activated my phone's emergency protocol. A feature I'd installed years ago after receiving death threats. It would transmit my location and automatically upload my photos to my editor. Hours later, Mayor Wilson returned alone. "Your decision, Mr. Harper? I'll join you," I said flatly. "I don't have much choice," he smiled, extending his hand. "Welcome to the true Millhaven." As we shook, the door burst open. Federal agents, not the ones working with Millhaven, but FBI, flooded the room. My editor had received my signal and made the right calls. In the chaos that followed, I learned the truth. The government had indeed known about Formula 37B, but only a corrupt faction within the intelligence community had sanctioned Millhaven's methods. For decades, they had operated beyond oversight, the product too valuable to question its source. Millhaven's secret came crashing down. The processing plant was raided. Mass graves were discovered in the cave systems beneath the town. Hundreds of missing persons cases across multiple states were suddenly solved. That was a year ago. I wrote the exposé of my career, then entered witness protection. Most Millhaven residents were prosecuted. Many had actively participated in selecting contributors, while others had simply maintained the conspiracy of silence. But I still can't escape the feeling that it's not over. The formula was too valuable, the operation too extensive to be fully dismantled. Sometimes, when checking my mail in my new home thousands of miles away, I feel watched. Last week, I received a blank white card in my mailbox. The message was simple. We told you. No questions. I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't know where I'll go next, but I know that somewhere, the silent agreement continues, and they haven't forgotten the journalist who broke it. Red Gulch was never more than a speck on the map. Just another forgotten mining town in Wyoming, withered and brittle, clutching to its memories like bones to dried skin. I arrived chasing local folklore for my blog, expecting ghost stories and dusty legends, something harmless, quaint even. The town was quiet, subdued, houses leaned, paint peeling like dead skin. The few residents watched me cautiously, suspicion woven into their silent stares. I eventually found Edgar Caldwell, an 80-year-old retired miner with watery eyes and trembling hands, who offered me stories for the price of cheap whiskey and company. As we sat in his cramped living room, shadows from a single lamp danced on walls cluttered with framed photos of smiling faces now faded and gray. After my recorder clicked on, Edgar's tone dropped low, conspiratorial. Most folks here got short memories, son, Edgar said softly, eyes distant. Some things people choose not to remember. Like what? I asked gently, hoping to encourage him. He took a long, careful sip, hand quivering slightly. We call them the Collectors. Been around longer than my granddad's time. Local group, secretive, always watching. You wander near them old mines. Sometimes they take a liking to something you got. Jewelry, keepsakes. Sometimes people. I smiled politely. Skepticism, clear. Sounds like an urban legend. He fixed me with a hard stare. Ain't no legend. Seen it myself. He pointed at a faded picture on the wall. 4 men in mining gear. Edgar's fingers shook slightly. 2 of those men vanished one night in '73. Their bodies never found. But their boots, their helmets, those turned up weeks later at the mine's entrance, neatly lined up, clean as church shoes. I felt unease creep down my spine, brushing it off quickly. Towns like this thrived on superstition. Still, I humored him. How do you avoid them? Simple, Edgar whispered, eyes suddenly wide, his voice strained. Don't go near the mines. I nodded, humoring him, already planning tomorrow's hike to the abandoned shafts. After all, eerie stories made for excellent blog posts. The next morning, clouds hung low, muffling sounds and shrouding Red Gulch in oppressive gloom. As I drove out toward the mine, Edgar's warning buzzed annoyingly at the edge of my thoughts. I parked beside a rusted fence, a wooden sign creaking softly in the wind. No trespassing. Ignoring it, I stepped onto cracked earth. Silence enveloped me, heavy and watchful. The mine entrance yawned wide, shadows pooling thickly within. Something about its blackness felt alive. Waiting, my camera clicked quietly, capturing the abandoned tools, shattered lanterns, rusted tracks disappearing into darkness. Something glittered at the edge of my vision, barely noticeable. Curiosity tugged me forward. A ring sat neatly atop a dusty rock, a simple gold band engraved with faint initials. The air grew colder. A sudden, sharp whisper echoed from within the mine. My heart jumped painfully. Hello? My voice shook slightly, absurdly loud. Silence replied. The wind carried a faint scraping sound behind me. Spinning quickly, I saw no one. Yet, something felt changed. I quickly pocketed the ring, nervousness creeping in. Back at my motel room, sleep eluded me. I tossed restlessly, haunted by whispers, shadowed movements dancing in corners of vision. At 3 a.m., the soft scrape of metal against wood stirred me fully awake. The motel door stood slightly ajar, swinging slowly in a non-existent breeze. On the worn carpet, perfectly placed, lay a miner's helmet, old-fashioned, rusted, strangely clean. Fear crawled through me like spiders. Breathing ragged, I stepped out cautiously, glancing down the empty hallway, lit by buzzing fluorescents. Nothing. The helmet felt heavy in my hands. Inside, neatly folded, was a single scrap of paper. Return it. A wave of dread struck violently. The ring. I scrambled, pulling the ring from my jacket pocket. Holding it now felt wrong. A violation. I knew instantly what I'd done. The drive back to the mine was frantic. Headlights slicing darkness into trembling fragments. Clouds pressed low, suffocating. Tires skidded onto gravel as I leapt from the car, clutching the ring, approaching the mine. Dread expanded with every breath. A flashlight flickered faintly within the mine's throat. I froze. Someone was inside. Hello? I called again, weaker this time, voice small against oppressive silence. A shape moved, becoming clearer. A tall, shadowy figure emerged slowly, features obscured, dressed in old miner's gear. Behind him, more figures materialized, faceless shadows gathering silently. Here, it's yours. I stammered desperately, voice cracking. I tossed the ring forward. It landed softly. The figure didn't move. Silence stretched unbearably. Too late, the figure whispered softly, his voice gritty, dry as dust. We already chose something else to collect. What? Panic surged, muscles tightening painfully. You, came the chilling reply, echoed by ghostly murmurs of agreement from shadows behind him. I stumbled backward, legs suddenly weak. They stepped forward together, synchronized, deliberate, their footsteps crunching softly on gravel. Turning, I fled blindly toward my car. I heard their footsteps quickening behind me, silent now except for my own ragged breathing. The car seemed impossibly far. Suddenly, hands grabbed me. Cold, iron grips like shackles. Struggling frantically, vision blurred with terror, I kicked and fought. Pain exploded across my skull. Darkness flooding swiftly in. I woke in darkness. Cold stone pressed against my back. Dirt clogged my throat. My head pounded. Vision blurred. Scrambling weakly upright. Horror blossomed sharply. I was deep within the mine. Walls pressed close. Dripping moisture around me. Neatly arranged on stone shelves carved into the cavern walls were belongings. Watches, rings, glasses. Carefully, methodically arranged collections. Among them, neatly placed, were old, yellowed photographs. Smiling faces of missing men and women, dating decades back. A new shelf was empty, waiting. Shouting hoarsely, I stumbled forward, flashlight shaking violently in my grip. Echo swallowed my cries. Panic swelled unbearably, hopelessness drowning reason. Ahead, a small opening appeared, moonlight faintly visible. Freedom. I scrambled desperately, adrenaline lending strength, the narrow passage scraping painfully against my skin. Just inches from escape, fingers stretching outward, another whisper came from darkness behind me. We always finish what we start. Hands seized my ankles again, dragging me backward, screaming helplessly as nails clawed uselessly against stone. The opening shrank, moonlight fading, replaced by suffocating blackness. Edgar Caldwell sat silently the next morning, watching sunrise with hollow eyes, whiskey untouched. Another stranger had vanished from Red Gulch overnight, but he wouldn't tell authorities what he knew. He'd warned the young man. Some secrets were best kept hidden, especially from those who collected them. My name is Leah, and I'm a travel writer, always chasing the quirky, off-the-beaten-path stories. This trip was supposed to be about exploring forgotten folk art traditions in Appalachia. My old sedan, usually reliable, chose the most inopportune moment to die. A shudder, a cough, then an ominous silence, miles from anywhere that looked remotely like civilization. My phone predictably displayed no service. Hours earlier, I'd stopped at a dusty one-pump gas station that felt like a relic from another era. The attendant, a leathery old man with eyes that had seen too many winters, squinted at my out-of-state plates. As he handed back my card, he'd offered a piece of unsolicited advice, his voice low and gravelly. If you find yourself near a town called Serenity, best keep moving. And if you can't, well, you respect their ways here. He hadn't elaborated, just turned away, leaving me with a faint prickle of unease I'd quickly dismissed. Now, his words echoed in my mind with a newfound, chilling resonance. My car had been up the ghost at the bottom of a shallow valley. A weathered wooden sign, half hidden by overgrown weeds, pointed down a narrow side road. Serenity, 2 miles. 2 miles. It might as well have been 100. With no other option, I started walking, my backpack feeling heavier with each step. Serenity, when I finally reached it, was unsettling. It wasn't dilapidated or overtly menacing. In fact, it was unnervingly pristine. Neat, identical white houses with perfectly manicured lawns lined the single main street. Not a soul was visible. No cars parked along the curb. No children playing. No dogs barking. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the cool afternoon breeze. It felt less like a town and more like a meticulously crafted diorama. In the center of town was a small, well-kept square, dominated by a tall, stark white church, with a steeple that seemed to pierce the sky. And that's when I saw them. Figures standing at the edge of the square, partially obscured by the long shadows of the late afternoon. Perhaps half a dozen of them. They were dressed in dark, heavy-looking robes, their hoods pulled low, completely obscuring their faces. They stood perfectly still, like statues, their forms blending into the deepening twilight, watching me. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I told myself they were just townspeople, maybe some local religious order, but their stillness, their utter silence, the way their hooded heads seemed to track my every movement without actually turning, it was deeply unnerving. I tried a hesitant wave, a weak hello. No response, just the silent, unwavering regard. I found what looked like the town's only store, a general mercantile with a hand-painted sign. The bell above the door tinkled with an almost shocking loudness in the pervasive quiet. Inside, a woman with a severe face and hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, regarded me with cool, assessing eyes. I explained my situation, asked if there was a mechanic, a phone. "We have a phone," she said, her voice flat, devoid of inflection. "For town use." She gestured to an ancient black rotary phone on the counter. "No mechanic here. Tow truck comes from Oak Haven, if Mr. Elias calls it. He is our elder." She didn't offer to call. She didn't ask if I needed anything else. Her gaze was heavy, expectant. Could I speak to Mr. Elias? He'll be at evening service, at the church. She glanced pointedly at the clock. Soon? The implication was clear. I was to wait, to attend. I bought a bottle of water, the silence in the store pressing in on me. As I stepped back outside, the robed figures were still there, in the same positions, their hooded faces still turned towards me. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. The shadows deepened, and the figures seemed to grow, to multiply in my peripheral vision. The walk to the church felt like miles. The robed figures didn't follow, but I could feel their gaze on my back. The church door was heavy, unadorned wood. Inside it was dim, lit by flickering candles. The pews were filled with more robed figures, their heads bowed. At the front, on a raised dais, stood an older man, his robes slightly more ornate. Mr. Elias, I presumed. His face, when he finally looked up as I hovered uncertainly at the back, was gaunt, his eyes burning with a fervent intensity. The service was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. No hymns I recognized, no familiar scriptures, just a low, rhythmic chanting, a guttural drone that seemed to vibrate in my bones. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something musky and unsettling. I felt a growing panic, a desperate urge to flee. During a pause in the chanting, Mr. Elias' gaze found me. "The traveler," he said, his voice surprisingly powerful, echoing in the stillness. "You seek passage from Serenity? My car. It broke down," I stammered. "I need a tow truck." "How things happen for a reason," he intoned, his eyes never leaving mine. "Serenity offers refuge to those who are lost, if they are willing to embrace our ways, to be cleansed, Cleansed. The word sent a shiver down my spine. The world outside is full of corruption, of noise, he continued, his voice rising. Here we have peace. We have purity. We have order. He gestured to the silent, robed congregation. You will stay. You will learn. You will become one with Serenity. It wasn't an invitation. It was a decree. The robed figures slowly turned their hooded heads towards me. A silent, unified wave of pressure. I saw a glimpse of a face beneath one hood. Pale skin, eyes wide and vacant, a look of utter, terrifying resignation. That was when I ran. I turned and bolted from the church, bursting out into the twilight. The town square was no longer empty. More robed figures were there, emerging from the identical white houses, moving with a slow, deliberate purpose, forming a loose cordon. They didn't shout, they didn't run. They just moved to block me. My car was 2 miles away, an impossible distance. I sprinted down the main street, my heart hammering, expecting at any moment a hand to grab me, to be dragged back to that suffocating church. I saw a narrow alley between 2 houses and plunged into it, hoping it led out of town. It opened onto a field, and beyond that, the dark woods. I ran until my lungs burned, until the sounds of Serenity, the faint, resumed chanting, the rustle of unseen movement, faded behind me. I didn't find my car that night. I stumbled through the woods, disoriented and terrified, until, by some miracle, I hit a paved road just as dawn was breaking. A passing trucker, his face a welcome sight of normalcy, picked me up. I told the police my story. They were polite, took notes. But Serenity? They couldn't find any town by that name on their maps, not in that area. No record of a Mr. Elias or a church fitting my description. It was as if the town itself had been a hallucination, a nightmare conjured by a broken-down car and a lonely road. But I know what I saw. I still see those silent, hooded figures in my dreams, their faces always obscured, their judgment absolute. I never found out what their ways truly entailed, what cleansing meant. I don't want to. Sometimes, when I'm driving through remote countryside, I see a turnoff, a dirt road leading into the unknown, and that old gas station attendant's warning comes back to me. Respect their ways. And I just keep driving a little faster. The memory of Serenity a cold weight in the pit of my stomach. A chilling reminder that some places are best left lost, their secrets undisturbed. I dropped my toolbox by the stairs and started exploring. The living room had faded wallpaper. The kitchen had chipped Formica counter. My Uncle Ray was a loner, a retired truck driver who kept to himself. Family barely saw him, but I remembered his gruff voice and calloused hands from childhood visits. Upstairs, the bedrooms were bare, mattresses sagging. The attic door, tucked in the hole, was locked, its knob cold and stubborn. I jimmied it open with a screwdriver, the hinges groaning like a low moan. The attic was a maze of cobwebs and shadows, the air thick with mildew. My flashlight beam caught a trunk in the corner, black metal, padlocked, its surface scratched as if clawed. My pulse quickened. I knelt, the floorboards creaking, and tapped the lock. A faint thump came from inside, like something shifting. I froze, heart thudding, the beam trembling in my hand. The sound didn't repeat, but the attic felt smaller, the shadows deeper. I left the trunk, telling myself I'd deal with it later. Downstairs, I called my cousin Lila, a hairdresser who'd known Ray better. Ever hear about a trunk in his attic? I asked, voice low. She paused, dishes clinking in the background. He never let us up there. Said it was private. Kinda weird, honestly. She promised to ask her dad, Ray's brother, for more. I hung up, the trunk's thump echoing in my mind. That night, I slept in the guest room, the bed creaking with every move. A scrape woke me at 3 a.m., slow and deliberate, from the attic. I grabbed my flashlight, breath shallow, and listened. Silence. Then another scrape, like nails on metal, but my skin crawled, like eyes were on me. Morning brought a gray drizzle. I drove to the town's diner, hoping for answers. The waitress Marge, a wiry woman with a smoker's rasp, remembered Ray. Kept to himself, always paid cash, she said, pouring coffee. Heard he collected stuff from his roots. Odd stuff. I asked about the attic. her eyes narrowed and pausing mid-pour. Never heard of no trunk, but Ray was particular. Stopped coming here years back. I left the word particular sticking like a burr. Back at the house, the attic door was ajar. Though I'd locked it, my stomach twisted. I climbed the stairs, flashlight in one hand, hammer in the other. The trunk was untouched, but a faint smell, sour, like rotting fruit, hung in the air. I pried the padlock with my crowbar, the metal screaming. Inside, a plastic bag held 12 driver's licenses, all women, from states Ray's roots crossed. Ohio, Texas, Nevada, more. Their faces stared up, eyes wide, some licenses creased, others pristine. Dates ranged from 1985 to 2010. My hands shook as I read the names, the addresses, the lives. I stumbled downstairs, dialing Lila. Ray's got licenses in the attic. I blurted, "Women, dozens." Her voice tightened. "That's not right, Ben. Call the cops." I did, my voice shaking as I told Sheriff Tate about the trunk. He arrived with a deputy, their boots heavy on the porch. They bagged the licenses, their faces grim. "Could be nothing," Tate said, but his eyes said otherwise. Ray was clean, far as we knew. "We'll run these." That night, I stayed at a motel, the house too heavy to bear. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, a photo from an unknown number. It was the attic, the trunk open. My crowbar beside it, taken hours ago. My throat closed. I called Tate, who searched the house. No signs of entry, no prints. "Could be a prank," he said, but he posted a deputy outside. Dad says Ray had a friend, Earl. A drifter he met trucking. Shady guy, stayed with Ray sometimes. They fought years back. Earl. A name, a shadow. I returned to the house, driven by a need to understand. The attic smelled worse, the sourness thicker. I found scratches on the trunk's lid. Fresh, like fingernails. A new sound. A low hum, like a voice muffled by walls, came from the floorboards. I tore them up, hammer clawing, and found a hidden compartment. Inside, a notebook, Ray's handwriting. Names matching the licenses, dates, routes. Notes like, "Too loud, fought back, quiet now." My blood ran cold. Ray wasn't collecting. He was hunting. A crash shook the house, glass shattering downstairs. I gripped the hammer, heart roaring, and crept down. The kitchen window was smashed, muddy footprints trailing inside. They led to the basement door, now open, a faint hum rising from below. I called Tate, whispering, but followed the prints, flashlight shaking. The basement was damp, concrete walls slick, a metal door rusted, stood at the far end, padlocked. The hum was louder, human, pleading. I pried the lock, the door groaning open. Inside, a small room, walls scratched with frantic marks. A man, gaunt, gray-haired Earl, stood over a chained figure. A woman, gagged, eyes wide. "You found Ray's work," Earl snarled, a knife glinting in his hand. I swung the hammer, catching his shoulder, but he lunged, blade grazing my arm. The woman screamed through the gag. I tackled him, the knife clattering, and pinned him, blood pounding in my ears. Tate's deputies stormed in, cuffing Earl, freeing the woman. Lila's friend, missing for weeks. Earl confessed. He and Ray targeted women on Ray's roots. A decades-long spree, driven by a shared need to dominate, to silence. The licenses were trophies, the basement their vault. Earl kept it going after Ray died, unable to stop. The cops found remains in the woods, linked to the licenses. I sold the house, moved to Louisville, but last week, a letter came. No address, just a driver's license, mine. Forged, dated yesterday. On the back, in jagged scrawl, "You're next." I check my locks. Keep a gun now, but every creak, every shadow, feels like Earl's knife or Ray's ghost, carving my name. The house is gone, but its secrets cling like damp rot. I'm safe, they say, but I know someone's out there, collecting, and I'm not just a name anymore. My name is Jake, a history teacher on a summer road trip, chasing ghost towns and forgotten highways. I'm not a true crime junkie, but I had seen the documentary, The Vanishings at Blackwater Creek. It detailed a string of unsolved disappearances over 2 decades, all centered around the remote, isolated logging town of Havenwood, nestled deep in the Pacific Northwest. It was a chilling piece, full of grieving families and frustrated investigators. I never intended to go there, but a sudden bridge closure, a detour sign scrawled on plywood, and a malfunctioning GPS conspired to lead my dusty sedan right into its quiet, shadowed streets. The air in Havenwood felt heavy. Heavy. It was late afternoon, the sun already beginning to dip behind the towering pines that hemmed the town in, casting long, grasping shadows. The place had a worn, tired look, like an old photograph slowly fading. Main Street was lined with storefronts, some boarded up, others displaying dusty, uninspired goods. There was a palpable stillness, an absence of the usual small-town bustle. Even the birds seemed to have muted their songs. My stomach rumbled. The only place that looked open was a diner, the Havenwood Grill, its neon sign flickering erratically. Inside, the smell of stale coffee and fried food hung thick. A few locals, rough-looking men in flannel shirts and worn jeans, sat at the counter, their conversations ceasing abruptly as I walked in. They watched me with flat, incurious eyes. The waitress, a woman with a tired face and a name tag that read Doris, managed a weary smile. As I waited for my burger, my gaze drifted to a large corkboard on the far wall. It wasn't a community notice board. It was a shrine to the lost. Dozens of missing person posters, faded and curled at the edges, were tacked up. A mosaic of smiling, hopeful faces. Hikers, truckers, families on vacation, all of whom had last been seen in or around Havenwood. Some were decades old, the ink blurred, the faces almost ghosts. Others were chillingly recent. The sheer volume was staggering, far more than the documentary had even hinted at. A cold knot tightened in my gut. This wasn't just a town with a dark past. It felt like a town still living that darkness. The sheriff walked in then, his boots heavy on the linoleum. He was a big man, barrel-chested, with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to see too much. His badge read, Sheriff Brody. He nodded to the locals. Then his gaze settled on me, the obvious outsider. He ambled over to my booth. Passing through, he asked, his voice a low rumble. Yeah, just grabbing a bite. Yeah, just grabbing a bite. Detours end me this way, I replied, trying to sound casual. He nodded slowly. Havenwood's a quiet place, not much for tourists. He glanced at the wall of posters, then back at me. Best to keep moving through once you're done here. Roads get tricky after dark. His smile was a brief, thin stretch of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't a friendly suggestion. It felt like a warning, edged with something I couldn't quite name. Weariness, or perhaps a veiled threat. My burger arrived, but my appetite had vanished. The diner's atmosphere, the silent scrutiny of the other patrons, the sheriff's unsettling advice. It all combined to create a suffocating sense of unease. I ate quickly, paid my bill, and got back in my car. The image of those missing faces seared into my mind. As I drove out of Havenwood, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and bruised purple. The shadows of the pines stretched across the road like skeletal fingers. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Sheriff Brody's cruiser, or worse, one of those silent, watchful locals. The town felt like it was exhaling me, letting me go. For now. A few miles out, my car started to sputter. The engine coughed, choked, then died. I coasted to the side of the deserted highway, a sick feeling of dread washing over me. No signal. Of course. This was exactly the kind of scenario that had prefaced so many of those stories on the diner wall. Stranded, alone, near Havenwood. I popped the hood, though I knew nothing about engines. As I fruitlessly jiggled a few wires, a pair of headlights appeared, coming from the direction of Havenwood. It was an old, beat-up pickup truck, the kind I'd seen parked all over town. It slowed and pulled up beside me. The driver was one of the men from the diner, his face impassive in the dim glow of my hazard lights. Trouble? He asked, his voice flat. Yeah, car just died on me, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. He grunted. Sheriff Brody usually patrols this stretch. He'll find you, or someone will. He didn't offer help. He just sat there, engine idling, watching me. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Then he said, almost to himself, Lots of folks break down out here. Ground's hungry. He put the truck in gear and drove off, leaving me in the oppressive darkness, his last words echoing in my ears. Ground's hungry. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. I grabbed my small overnight bag from the car. Waiting for Brody or someone felt like waiting for a predator. I started walking back towards Havenwood. It was insane, I knew, walking towards the place that terrified me. But staying by the dead car felt like being bait. Maybe I could find a landline, call a tow service from a neighboring county, bypass Havenwood's hospitality. The walk was a nightmare. Every rustle in the woods, every snap of a twig sounded like footsteps. The moon was a sliver, offering little light. When I finally saw the faint glow of Havenwood streetlights, it wasn't with relief, but with a renewed sense of dread. I skirted the main street, sticking to the dark back alleys. I was looking for the sheriff's office, hoping it might have an external phone, or that Brody might be the lesser of evils. That's when I saw it. Behind the general store, near a row of overflowing dumpsters, was a large, newly constructed woodshed, its raw pine gleaming faintly. The door was slightly ajar, and from within, I heard a low, rhythmic sound. Thump, scrape, thump, scrape. Against every instinct, I crept closer. Peeking through the crack, my heart hammering, I saw a single bare bulb illuminating the interior. Sheriff Brody was there, and two of the men from the diner. They weren't chopping wood. They were digging a deep, rectangular hole in the earthen floor of the shed. Next to it, several large, heavy-duty plastic tarps, and a pile of what looked like license plates from different states. One of the men grunted, leaning on his shovel. "This one makes what, Brody?" "Number 37. Brody didn't answer, just wiped sweat from his brow with a weary gesture. "Just get it done. And make sure his car is well off the road before morning. The less questions, the better. Town needs to eat. Town needs to eat." The phrase so mundane, so chillingly practical. The documentary hadn't been about random disappearances. It was about a town's gruesome cottage industry, a tradition. They weren't just covering things up. They were the cause. I didn't see more. I backed away, slowly, silently, then turned and fled into the darkness of the surrounding forest. The sounds of their digging a horrifying soundtrack to my escape. I ran blindly, stumbling, falling, driven by a primal terror. I don't know how many hours I ran, or in what direction. Just before dawn, bruised, scratched, and half delirious, I stumbled onto a different highway, flagging down a bewildered trucker who looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. The ghosts of Havenwood and the ones it was still creating. And I told my story. Again. This time with more urgency, more detail. There was an investigation, a real one. What they found in Havenwood, in that shed, in the shallow graves in the woods beyond, was enough to make national headlines for weeks. Far eclipsing the quiet documentary that had first whispered its name. The town was a carefully constructed trap, preying on the vulnerable, the lost, the unlucky. Sheriff Brody, Doris the waitress, the silent men in the diner, they were all part of it. A community bound by a terrible secret and a horrifying means of survival. Havenwood is a ghost town now, for real. But it's not empty. It's filled with the echoes of its victims, and the chilling knowledge that sometimes the most ordinary places harbor the most unspeakable horrors, just waiting for a detour, a breakdown, a traveler who won't be moving through. And sometimes the ground is indeed very hungry. The Millfield Monitor's offices smelled exactly as I remembered from my teenage internship. Ink, coffee, and the musty scent of old paper. Framed front pages lined wood-paneled walls, chronicling the sleepy history of our town. The latest edition celebrated Millfield's 5th consecutive Safest Small Town in America award. "Emma, welcome back." Harold Winters emerged from his glass-walled office, arms spread wide. 10 years older than when I'd left for journalism school. His hair now silver at the temples, but still sporting the same bow tie and suspenders. "Our prodigal reporter returns." I forced a smile. After being downsized from the Chicago Tribune, crawling back to my hometown paper wasn't exactly a triumphant homecoming. But rent doesn't pay itself, and the Monitor's job listing had appeared in my inbox like an omen. "Oh, thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Winters." "Harold, please." He guided me through the newsroom, smaller than I remembered. Just 3 desks besides his office. "You'll be our general assignment reporter. Features, town council, school board, the works." "And crime?" I asked. At the Tribune, I'd cut my teeth on the police beat. Something flickered across Harold's face, there and gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. "You'll find we don't have much use for a crime reporter in Millfield these days." Becky Allen, the paper's photographer since I was in diapers, snorted from her desk. "Last big crime was when someone stole Mayor Parker's garden gnomes." "What was that?" 2013. "We're fortunate," Harold said, his tone carrying a weight I couldn't quite interpret. "Millfield isn't like the cities. People look after each other here." The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Having covered Chicago's crime for 5 years, I knew one universal truth. Crime happens everywhere. A town with no crime wasn't fortunate. It was statistically impossible. My first 2 weeks passed in a blur of barn raisings, bake sales, and school sports. Every story felt sanitized, each article polished to a PR shine. When I suggested investigating the opioid crisis affecting neighboring counties, Harold gently redirected me to cover the Heritage Apple Festival instead. The pattern became clear after checking the archives. The Monitor hadn't reported a single crime in over 10 years. No thefts, no domestic disturbances, not even a DUI. The newspaper portrayed Millfield as a utopian community without fail. I mentioned this to my mother over Sunday dinner. "That can't be right," she said, brow furrowed. "What about Jenny Miller's boy? The one who broke into the pharmacy last year? Nothing in the paper about it, huh?" "Well, he's gone now anyway. His mother said he went to live with his father in Ohio." She passed the mashed potatoes. "Just like Diane Hayes. Remember her from your high school. Moved away last spring. No warning. Left her house and everything." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Mom, how many people have moved away suddenly in the past few years?" She thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, quite a few." Later that night, I searched online for Jenny Miller's son, Tyler. His social media accounts had been inactive for 13 months. Same for Diane Hayes. Nothing online since April. I created a spreadsheet of names I remembered, then cross-referenced with their digital footprints. 12 people had seemingly vanished from the internet after reportedly moving away from Millfield. None had been mentioned in the Monitor. The next morning, I casually asked Becky about photographing Tyler Miller's arrest last year. Her coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. "We didn't cover that." "Why not?" "Local kid breaking into the pharmacy seems newsworthy." Becky's eyes darted toward Harold's office. "We don't. Harold believes some stories do more harm than good. Community morale and all that." I leaned closer. "What about Diane Hayes? Or the Kaufman family who moved overnight last winter?" Becky's face drained of color. She set her mug down with a trembling hand. "Emma, let me give you some advice. The Monitor reports what Harold decides is news. That's how it's always worked. But we're journalists. We're community stewards." She corrected, voice barely above a whisper. "Some things are better left unreported, for everyone's sake." That afternoon, I drove to the Millfield Public Records Office. The clerk, an elderly woman named Dorothy, seemed surprised when I requested police reports from the past decade. "Whatever for, dear?" "Just research for the Monitor," I said with a practiced smile. Dorothy hesitated. "I'd need permission from Chief Williams or Mayor Parker." "Since when do public records require permission?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry. Those are the rules." After she refused me 3 times, I left, frustration burning in my chest. In my rearview mirror, I watched Dorothy make a phone call, her eyes following my car. That night, I broke into the Monitor's basement archives. The ancient filing cabinets contained physical copies of every issue dating back to 1902. I pulled the last decade of papers, comparing them with the digital archives I'd already reviewed. What I found made my blood run cold. The physical archives and digital versions didn't match. Police blotter sections had been physically cut from many issues before scanning. Entire articles were missing. I found an original article about Tyler Miller's arrest, with Harold's red pen striking through the entire piece. A note in the margin, "Not for publication." I photographed everything with trembling hands, jumping at every creak of the old building. When headlights swept across the basement windows, I froze. A car had pulled into the parking lot. Harold's vintage Buick. At midnight, I killed my flashlight, gathering the evidence before slipping out the back door. As I crept around the building, I heard voices from Harold's office. Him and Chief Williams, their shadows distorted on the blinds. "Another one?" Harold asked. "The Peterson girl?" the chief replied. "Caught her stealing prescription pads from the clinic. Third offense. Her mother, sedated. She won't remember by morning." "Good. We'll announce she's attending boarding school in Vermont. Make the arrangements." My stomach churned. I knew Abby Peterson, a troubled 17-year-old, yes. But arrangements sounded ominously different from juvenile detention. I backed away, bumping into a trash can. The metal lid clattered against concrete. The office went silent. I ran. The next day, I called in sick. Instead of staying home, I drove to the addresses of everyone on my list of missing persons. Most homes had new occupants who knew nothing of the previous residents. Diana Hayes' house stood empty, mail overflowing her box. At Tyler Miller's home, his mother answered, eyes vacant and smile too wide. "Tyler's doing wonderfully in Columbus," she said, words rehearsed. "He writes every week." "May I see one of his letters?" I asked. Her smile remained fixed, but something flickered behind her eyes. Fear. "I don't share personal correspondence with strangers." "Mrs. Miller, I'm not a stranger. I went to school with Tyler. I'm worried about him." Her expression hardened. "You should worry about yourself, Emma Reed. Asking questions nobody wants answered." The door closed in my face. I visited 3 more homes with similar results. Rehearsed stories, hostile reactions. No proof anyone had actually relocated. By sunset, I was convinced. People weren't moving away from Millfield. They were disappearing, and the entire town was complicit in covering it up. That evening, a knock at my apartment door revealed Chief Williams. His cruiser, idling at the curb. "Harold mentioned you called in sick," he said. "Oh, folksy concern. Thought I'd check on you." "I'm feeling better," I replied, not opening the screen door. "Good to hear." His eyes hardened. "Also wanted to discuss your research project." My mouth went dry. "My what?" "Dorothy mentioned you were seeking police records. And Harold's concerned about some missing archives." "Just background for a feature." I lied, comparing Millfield's crime rates historically. The chief's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We're having a town council meeting tonight. Special session. Harold thought you might want to attend. Professional interest. Every instinct screamed danger. I'm still feeling under the weather. I insist." His hand rested on his holster. "For your own good, Emma." The town hall was packed when we arrived. Harold sat with Mayor Parker and other council members at the front. Familiar faces filled the seats. Teachers, shopkeepers, neighbors I'd known my entire life, all watching me with expressions ranging from pity to thinly veiled hostility. Harold approached the podium. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We have a situation that requires community attention. We have a situation that requires community attention." My heart hammered against my ribs as he explained my dangerous obsession with non-existent crimes and missing persons. How I was disturbing community peace with baseless accusations. "Emma suffers from the big city mentality." Harold continued, "Seeing conspiracy where there is only small-town success. Our crime rates aren't statistical anomalies. They're the result of our community covenant." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. 10 years ago, we made a decision," Mayor Parker added, standing. "Millfield would become truly safe. No exceptions, no second chances for those who threaten our peace." "What does that mean?" I asked, voice echoing in the sudden silence. "What happened to Tyler Miller? To Diane Hayes? To all the others who supposedly moved away?" The mayor smiled coldly. "They were given choices, reform or relocate. Some chose poorly. Some chose poorly." "You can't just make people disappear," I shouted. "We don't make anyone disappear," Harold said calmly. "We simply don't report their crimes or their punishments. The monitor prints what builds our community, not what destroys it." "And the families? The sedated mothers? The rehearsed stories?" Chief Williams stepped forward. "Some need help accepting the community's decisions. We provide that help." A cold horror washed over me as I realized the scale of the conspiracy. The entire town leadership, working together to remove undesirables and suppress the truth, all to maintain their perfect statistics, their awards, their property values. "Where are they?" I demanded. The people you've relocated. Harold sighed. Emma, you've always been too curious for your own good. Even as an intern, we had hopes you'd matured. We're offering you the same choice, the mayor added. Join our covenant of silence or relocate. Permanently. I looked around the room, searching for one sympathetic face, finding none. These were people I'd grown up with, trusted, all complicit in whatever happened to those who broke their rules. I choose option 3, I said, pulling out my phone. I sent everything I found to my editor in Chicago. Police reports, missing persons information, evidence of your cover-ups. If I don't check in every 12 hours, she publishes everything. Bluffing. A desperate bluff. My former editor hadn't returned my calls in months. Harold and the chief exchanged glances. The mayor's smile faltered. You're lying, Harold said, but uncertainty tinged his voice. Am I? I met his gaze steadily. Would you bet Millfield's perfect reputation on it? How will you explain a dozen missing persons once the state police start digging? Where are the bodies, Harold? The room erupted in nervous whispers. I'd struck a nerve. There's a third option, Harold finally said. We bring you into the full truth, show you why our methods are necessary. What happens to those who repeatedly endanger Millfield? Harold, no. The mayor protested. She leaves us no choice. Harold gestured to the chief. Take her to the Preservation Center. The Preservation Center turned out to be the abandoned cannery at the edge of town. As the chief's cruiser approached, I noticed new security features. Cameras, reinforced doors, a modern keypad entry system, incongruent with the deteriorating exterior. Inside was worse than I imagined. Not a torture chamber or execution site, something far more insidious. Sterile white halls led to rooms where Millfield's relocated residents lived in a drugged haze. Some worked at simple tasks. Others stared vacantly at screens playing endless propaganda about community values. We don't kill people, Harold explained as we walked the halls. We rehabilitate them. Those who can't be rehabilitated provide labor for the community's benefit. This is slavery, I whispered, watching Tyler Miller mechanically sorting recycling materials, his once bright eyes now vacant. This is justice, Harold corrected. Humana, effective justice. No overcrowded prisons. No recidivism. Just productivity and safety. You're monsters. We're visionaries. Every community secretly wishes they could remove their problems so efficiently. He gestured around the facility. 10 years ago, Millfield had drugs, theft, domestic violence, just like anywhere else. Now we're the safest town in America. The happiest town. Because we took control of our narrative, literally. And the newspaper? Harold smiled. The most powerful tool of all. Control information. Control reality. No crime in the paper means, effectively, no crime exists. The few who notice discrepancies are easily adjusted. In a cramped office, he showed me decades of records. Hundreds of names, far more than I discovered. Generations of problems removed from public view. Their families gaslighted or coerced into silence. Now you understand your options clearly, Harold said. Join us in the Monitor's mission. Help us maintain Millfield's perfect image. Or join our residents here, where your journalistic talents can be redirected to more constructive writing. I thought of my bluff. The evidence I'd claimed to send. The editor who wouldn't notice if I disappeared. My mother, who would be helped to accept whatever story they created about me. I'll need time to think, I said carefully. Harold nodded. Satisfied. One day. Chief Williams will keep you company until then. That night, locked in my apartment with Williams watching from his cruiser outside, I made my decision. I wrote the truth. All of it. The missing persons. The cannery. The town's conspiracy of silence. I included names, dates, locations. Everything I'd discovered. Then I scheduled dozens of emails to media outlets, law enforcement agencies, and human rights organizations, set to send automatically if I didn't reset the timer every 24 hours. At dawn, I told Harold I'd joined the Monitor's mission. He was pleased, but cautious. You understand what this means? Complete commitment to Millfield's greater good. I understand completely, I assured him. 3 days later, my byline appeared beneath the most important headline of my career. Millfield Monitor exclusive. Town leaders arrested in mass kidnapping conspiracy. I'd published the truth in their own paper, distributing it before Harold or anyone else could stop the presses. By the time they realized what had happened, state police were already entering the cannery, FBI agents were questioning the mayor, and my evidence was being broadcast nationally. Not everyone in town was complicit. Many were as horrified as I was. Others had been silenced by fear. The loudest defenders of the Millfield method now face conspiracy charges. The Monitor continues publishing with a new editorial board committed to actual journalism. I've stayed on as managing editor, ensuring every crime, however small, gets reported accurately, because the most dangerous crimes are the ones no one is allowed to talk about. The ones erased from the record as if they never happened. The ones buried beneath perfect headlines in perfect towns where nothing bad ever seems to happen. At least, not in print. The farmhouse was a foreclosure, a fixer-upper with character, the listing promised. My wife Mia and I, Tom Carver, saw hope in its sagging porch and golden wheat fields, whispering escape from Chicago's grind. I'd quit teaching after burnout. Mia, a graphic designer, craved quiet after our miscarriage last spring. Our greyhound Gus had other ideas. The moment we unlocked the cellar door, he lunged, snarling, his claws scraping oak like we had led him to slaughter. The cellar wall bore patches, too smooth, too new. Mia chipped one with a crowbar, her phone flashlight trembling. Mia chipped one with a crowbar, her phone flashlight trembling. Old repairs, maybe, she said. But the plaster dust smelled sweet, like rotting peaches, clogging our throats. Gus growled, hackles raised, staring at the wall as if it breathed. Sheriff Ellison rolled up in a creaky cruiser, baby-faced but sweating through his uniform. "Y'all watch too much true crime," he scoffed, tapping the wall with his boot. 1980s. Nothing more. 1980s. Nothing more? His eyes lingered on Mia, her hand resting on her flat stomach, and Gus's growl deepened. Ellison's hand twitched toward his holster, a warning in his glance. At dawn, Mia found a tiny rib cage in the compost pile, half buried among coffee grounds. "Raccoon, probably," she whispered, but her eyes were hollow. The miscarriage had stolen her sleep, and now the farm seemed to watch her. I held her as she shook, Gus whining at her side. We'd moved to heal, not to break again. The town's welcome committee arrived with casseroles and probing smiles. Mrs. Harlow, the postmistress, gripped my arm, her nails biting. "Such fertile land, Tom. You'll bloom here." Her eyes flicked to the fields where wheat swayed like a living thing. That night, headlights idled at the field's edge, their beams cutting through fog. Gus barked, frantic, until they vanished. Ellison returned, uninvited, his cruiser blocking our drive. "Heard you were digging," he said, staring at Mia's stomach. "Bad idea. Disturb the soil, you disturb the yield." His voice was tight, his fingers brushing his gun. Gus bared teeth, and I pulled him back, my pulse racing. After Ellison left, Mia found Gus pawing at the cellar wall, a fresh crack leaking that sweet, sickly dust. We tore into the wall, crowbar splintering plaster, bones spilled out. Small, delicate, arranged in a spiral, each set tagged with faded ink. 1998, 2005, 2012. A child's vertebrae, a tiny skull, a femur no longer than my hand. Mia vomited into the dirt, her sobs echoing. Gus whimpered, clawing a fresh patch in the floor, where something glistened, another bone, still pink with marrow. We dialed 911, my hands shaking. The line went silent, then played a recording of children laughing, high and cruel, looping until I dropped the phone. Mia clutched Gus, her face pale. "What is this place, Tom?" At 3 a.m., Ellison's flashlight beam pinned us in the cellar. "Should have left it buried," he croaked, his voice cracking. Behind him stood the casserole ladies, shovels in hand, their aprons stained with earth. Mrs. Harlow smiled, her teeth glinting. "The land must eat, dear. It's been hungry since the drought of '76. They herded us to the fields, a wheat rustling like whispers. The compost pile steamed, bones boiling beneath, their shapes twisting in the heat. Ellison's gun wavered, his eyes wet. Dad ran this land. They outsiders never get it. We feed the soil, keep the balance. Crops for lives." Harlow nodded, her shovel scraping dirt. "Your loss," she said to Mia, "prepared you." Gus lunged, teeth sinking into Ellison's leg. Keith sinking into Ellison's leg. Shots rang out, and Gus collapsed, blood pooling under wheat. Mia screamed, clawing at Harlow, but the women pinned her. I dove for Ellison's gun, but a shovel struck my shoulder, pain exploding. They dragged us deeper, past a hidden pit, where roots curled around bone fragments pale as teeth. I kicked free, pulling Mia, and we ran, wheat slashing our skin. A trap snapped shut, a wire net rigged in the soil, snaring my leg. Harlow's laugh echoed. The land keeps what it claims. Mia cut the net with a rock, her hands bleeding. We stumbled to the road, flagging a passing trucker. Sirens wailed by dawn. The sheriff's office claimed Ellison fled. The women vanished. The cellar was empty. Bones gone. Walls were plastered. Harlow's post office was shuttered, her name erased from records. Mia's due date was yesterday. The sheriff's office sent a bassinet, a community gift. Inside, wrapped in burlap, was a child's rib bone, etched with IAT 2025. The card read, "Welcome to the family." I burned it, but the wheat grew taller, its stalks bending toward our windows. We buried Gus by the cellar, his grave unmarked. Mia doesn't sleep. Last night, I found her sleepwalking, digging in the fields, whispering, "Balance." A stalk sprouted where she knelt, its roots pulsing red. I hear children's laughter at night, faint from the soil. The 911 line still rings dead. I check the locks, the windows, the fields. The wheat watches, waiting. Beneath the bitter soil unearths the horror of communal sin and the cycles that bind us. The true terror isn't the bones. It's the harvest you'll sow to survive, the roots that claim you. Till the land, tend the crops, never look down.